We're going to start our discussion on the typical games and important positions of the Botvinnik variation with the classical game played between Mikhail Botvinnik and Boris Spassky in the Leiden International Tournament 1970. That game, we can say, was one of the first games in which Mikhail Botvinnik used this system, and it was a very strong and good game in which he had an excellent success. The game finished in a draw, but what's interesting is that Botvinnik received a winning positional advantage, and that could serve you as a base of what you can expect out of the Botvinnik system in English opening. After c4, e5, knight c3, knight c6, basically there is the move g3. Of course, we play the initial moves quickly, g3, g6, bishop g2, bishop g7. Now white goes with e4, d6, d3, and knight g7. Obviously, Boris Spassky wasn't best prepared against this opening, so that after knight ge2, castles, and bishop in this position, he played the move bishop d7. I have to say that bishop d7 looks pretty passive, but it made sense. He did not want to have his bishop on e6 where it could possibly get attacked with f4 to f5. But after bishop to d7, eventually he's preparing to probably even move the queen around and, who knows, maybe set up bishop h3. In any case, it's a developing move that probably doesn't matter as much, so Botvinnik used the most powerful move in that system, knight c3 to d5. Setting the knight in there is definitely quite useful. As I've mentioned, if black happens to exchange it, white will easily open the c-file and get ready to attack against black's c7 pawn. Spassky on his own did not want that, and in fact he played b5 in order to challenge the c4 pawn and thereby undermine white's knight on d5. So white does bishop g5, which is a typical maneuver intending to play even knight f6 or either bishop f6, forcing black to lose to lose that f7 to f6 and close his bishop. That's how after f6, white is ready to position his bishop back to e3, and he has a very comfortable pawn structure. f5, queen to d2. As you can see, most of white's pieces are already well coordinated. No matter what black does, white has the ability to plan on the queen side, and it is very difficult for black to manage in the range f4. Nowadays, people often do h6, g5 early in order to get f4, no matter that it weakens the king and leaves white with some other possibilities. Now, however, the battery of white's queen and the bishop definitely prevent h6 and g5 from coming, which leaves black with only one opportunity, no matter how unpleasant it is, in order to move the knight to d4, which will now lose more or less directly with bishop g5 and some similar moves like knight c6, knight c3, planning to trade, and black will experience some material damages right there. So no matter how unpleasant it is, he has to do the exchange on d5. When does he do it? Well, when he has the chance to, right now. Knight takes d, c takes d, and knight d4. Bringing the knight and hoping it in the center is a fine idea. Do after knight takes d4, e takes d, and then bishop g5. Most of black's pieces remain quite passive, and truly with these two weaknesses, which is the backwards pawn in c7, which can move, actually. Probably it's not permanently backwards, it can move, but there will be other weaknesses, like after the exchange, a7 will happen a weakness, the double pawns remain, and I think that therefore it's not so difficult to understand that white holds a very strong positional pressure that he may take advantage and transform into a more powerful one. Bishop h6, bishop takes h6, queen takes h6. Exchanging the bishops was probably a good choice by Botvinnik, but what was interesting is that he was able to maintain the positional advantage until after c5, d takes to c, and b takes to c. He didn't make the move of b3, which in fact missed the whole advantage since it left black to open to stabilize. What I want to say is one of the typical and most valuable, let's call it this way, ideas for the Botvinnik system is to consistently make sure that you keep the pressure, or you get that grip against black. As a result of playing at c5, I think that all I had to do was to take en passant, but not to play the passive b3, but rather consider moving with bishop h3. This move would have been very special, since after a c5 in e takes f, white was threatening to win the d6 pawn in case black takes back. And if he doesn't play that way, but he rather moves with something of, maybe we can say, queen f8 or something, white could play queen d2 and still maintain the pressure, because black can never take, at least not for the moment, since of a move like bishop e6, or d takes and bishop e6. So I think he would have to play a real bad formation, where he's quite weak, a pawn weakness on the f5, a weak king, and obviously white should be quite some better. But what I think is interesting about that game is, if we go from behind, we're going to see the excellent pawn skeleton and white's pieces developing. The knight in d5, planning after an exchange to open the c file and attack against c7. The excellent bishop g5 provokes black to weaken his own bishop, and in stopping any further counterplay with f4 to g5. And after all, when black finally decides to exchange, how white can create even more permanent weaknesses in front of black's position, and therefore hold the pressure and keep it up. I think that this is certainly one of the systems that we can consider available, and pretty interesting as a way to play the Botvinnik system.